All right, welcome back to the podcast. Today we have Steve Goble on. We're going to be focusing on what makes great company culture. So, Steve, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Brandon. Excited to be here with you on the Just Some BS podcast, man.
Thank you so much for the mini plug. I love it. So, on your LinkedIn, you have Chief People Builder, Organizational Development, building teams that positively affect the bottom line and the workplace culture. So, with
Yeah.
all that being said, what is your career elevator pitch? What does all that mean to you?
I help organizations solve their people problems.
Okay.
And despite the technological advances that have existed in the last, 5, 10 years, especially, it
Mhm.
seems just technology has just exploded and it's going to continue to explode.
Correct.
Business is still people, and relationship driven. And I don't see that changing ever. Not to the, I mean, it's going to change a little bit, but just not, it's not going away.
Mm.
So just focusing on how people interact, helping people to understand the differences that we all have from a upbringing standpoint, from an education standpoint, just from a behavioral standpoint, but how we utilize that in a positive way to get to get the results the business needs,
Mm.
and understanding those differences, you know, with a healthy mindset. So that the
Mm.
business can do what the business needs to do, so that we can provide for our families and ourselves.
So you mentioned bottom line in your LinkedIn like kind of script there, which I think is really interesting. Do you run into people who still believe that culture does not affect the bottom line?
Yes, all the time. And it blow. I mean, they won't exist in 10 years. Either they'll get bought
Mm.
out, they'll just slowly die a painful death. Especially with this generation that's coming into the workforce now, where they are so heavily focused on culture, sometimes at the expense of business. And I think that's a huge opportunity for organizations who understand the importance of the business and understands the importance of the culture to merge those two together, and become unstoppable for 15, 20, 25 years, where they can just really rocket ship into the
Yeah.
future.
Yeah, so I always refer internally to SWF to when I talk about culture, it's the competitive advantage that our
Hmm.
customers cannot go buy.
Right.
And it takes years of continuous improvement and trust and willingness to try. Like it's so important because I know that our competitors can't just go, you know what, we're gonna go match what they're doing over there, and we're gonna
Mhm.
go hire a bunch of smart people and they're gonna come fix our culture. It's the one area that you can't do that.
Your people is your only competitive advantage unless you have boatloads of money. And even then, I don't have boatloads of money. I'm not sure if you do at SWF, but the reality is 99.999% of the population does not have boatloads of money.
Mm.
So your people are the only true differentiator. With, again, going back to technology, there's ways to educate, there's ways to communicate, there's ways to learn stuff on the go. So those education aspects is still hugely important. You can't have people who aren't intelligent, but you need to take that intelligent people and combine it with somebody who cares about the culture and cares about relationships, and that is where that competitive advantage lies.
Do you target a specific industry? I know I have a lot of people on here
Hmm.
who are either helpful towards or consultancy or anything like that, but they target specific industries. Do you do the same?
I did when I started out. I came from the body shop world.
Okay.
I was the operations manager for a small company. We sold computer software and professional services into the body shop world.
Mhm.
I'm not good at fixing cars. Don't ask me to fix cars.
Yeah,
But I was
samesies.
good at the. I was good at interacting with the people side of things.
Okay.
And while I was there, I started a coaching division, because the body shop world 15, 20 years ago isn't what it is today. And again, they were great at fixing cars, but didn't deal with their people. So once I launched my business 14 years ago, I focused heavily on the body shop world, simply because that's where I came from. That's where I was, had a little bit of a known entity, so to speak, right?
Sure.
Um, 2021ish, after the influx of COVID, a number of my body shop guys sold their businesses. I was
Mm.
doing some executive coach with them, had some peer groups with the body shop guys, and they sold their businesses. So obviously, when they sell their businesses, they don't need me anymore,
Right.
which is, a pro and a con working with somebody, right? I mean,
Yeah.
work yourself out of a job is not really good when you're self-employed.
Yeah.
So I've since gone out to just target people who want to grow,
Okay.
and people who want to grow and want to get better come in all sorts of different industries. A couple of my clients are in the financial world right now. I have I'm have some ongoing discussions with an engineering firm right now, where some things will be transpose in the next week or so. Hopefully, get some answers to what happens there. But I've loved working with smaller businesses.
Mm.
But over the past 18 months or so, I've started to target some of those larger institutions because there's more people to help, but also the business reality is they can write bigger checks.
Yeah. What would you consider a small business? Like what's your range there?
50 people and under.
Okay.
Simply because, working directly with the owner, you see greater impact not only in the whole team, but also, the culture and the finances for that team, that
Mm.
small business.
Yeah.
Um, one of the clients I frequently work with is a smaller team within a larger company, and they're doing phenomenal within that company, and starting to expand more internally across that company now as well. But that's 6, 7 years in the making.
Sure.
It takes time with these bigger companies I found from a sales cycle, but also building up trust equity.
Yeah.
You mentioned
Good
trust.
point.
Trust is huge, um, and it's vitally important because healthy relationships are built on trust.
Mm.
You've heard the saying. You're very big on professional growth, continuous learning. You've heard the saying, people do business with people they know, like, and trust.
Yep.
Of those things, trust is the most important. You know a lot of people. You like a lot of people. You don't trust everybody you like, though.
That's true.
So,
Yeah, that's great. Steve, so I want to get into what you also put into the podcast notes. So you launched your business after losing your job while your daughter was 12 days old, which
yeah.
is quite a wild transition. What was going through your mind at the time, and how did you turn a tough situation into an opportunity?
Well, going back to the body shop days, right? That company I was operation manager for, and I said I started a coaching division. Um, One of my clients, it was a truck body shop, recruited
Okay.
me. And that's where I lost my job from after 90 days. So my wife and I, was our first child. My wife's a professional artist by trade. So we had the idea, okay, my wife's staying home, being a mom full time. We're shutting down her art business. So November 15th, I walk into the office Monday morning and say, yeah, you're no longer needed. So my daughter's 12 days old. And so for the next 6 weeks, because, November 15th of 2010, it's a week and a half before Thanksgiving, and then you get into Christmas. Nobody's really hiring, right? Plus, it was the
No.
tail end of the recession in 2010. I don't know if you
True.
remember. I know
Mhm.
you were in business then, at Day and Zimmerman, right?
Mhm.
And so, I just lounged around in self pity for 6 weeks.
Mm.
I was learning how to be a father. Daughter's brand new. Fortunately, my wife was able to finish up a few commissions and whatnot, so we were winding down her art business. So it
Sure.
made that process go a little bit quicker.
Sure.
But I was just, it took a hit. My ego took a hit.
Sure.
And we went from one income to zero income with a 12-day-old baby. So I started working on my resume, and then January 2nd, I'm out there hitting the pavement. Hey, I'm looking for work, all this. And I went to college in Philadelphia, so I was heavily researched on there. And I live in Lancaster County
Okay.
at the time, and I still do. But a lot of my opportunities that were serious were down in Philadelphia. I'm like, you know what? I don't want to commute 90 minutes one way.
Yeah.
Just
Yep.
with the newborn. Just it wasn't the goal. And so I always knew I wanted to be self-employed in some capacity. I'm very independent, very strong-minded, stubborn, cocky, arrogant, whatever you want to call it, right? It's just all these different words. And I'm not from
Choice
Lancaster.
F, all of the above.
And I'm not from Lancaster County, so that's a whole nother big thing. But the opportunity, I've also always been very big on professional growth and learning.
Yeah.
And I'd been following John Maxwell on social media,
Yeah.
and I jumped on a call with him, and he was launching the Maxwell leadership team. And I don't know if you're familiar with John Maxwell or not, for the audience is, but he's recognized as one of the top leadership experts in the world. He's written close to 100 books, with 30 plus of them being #1 bestsellers, selling, like 9 of them have sold 1 million copies or more. So, you know what? This is ideal. So what I did in, late February, early March 2011, I went back to a few guys from my body shop world, from, not the truck body shop, but the one before it, right?
Yeah.
Say, hey, you guys miss me. And a couple of them did. A couple of them were like, yeah, nah, go away. That's fine. But a couple of them thankfully missed me. Say, hey, here's this new opportunity for me to get certified as a coach, speaker with Maxwell Leadership. do you want to get back into what we were doing when I was with Company X? They're like, yes, let's do this. And that's how the Goble group was born 14 years ago here in March. And some days it's great being self-employed. Other days, not so much.
Sure.
But I grew up with the mindset, sink or swim, right? Just got thrown to the wolves a little bit. Got the battle scars to prove it. Still got battle scars sometimes being an entrepreneur this long, as I'm sure you do being a CEO for as long as you have been. There's all types of battle scars, but I love adding value to people and helping them achieve their goals. And when my clients are successful, that's when I'm successful. Because if I'm not making my clients successful, they're not making referrals, they're not hiring me, they're not continuing to work with me. So it's a different every day for sure.
It's so interesting when I talk to entrepreneurs because I don't consider myself one. I consider myself like a master manager because I don't think I could I don't have the risk profile to take the leaps that many of the people that I surround myself with or talk to that are just like, I'm betting on myself, going for it. Like, I think that's so incredible. And I just, when I try to wrap my head around that, especially in the situation you were, I mean, it's just like you said, sink or swim. Like, I'm betting on myself. I'm putting all the cards in. I'm going for it, and let's see what happens.
Yeah, well, one of the things, especially when I coach entrepreneurs or people who have an interest of getting out of the 9-to-5 corporate world, so to speak. My idea is that if you're not willing to bet on yourself, why should somebody else? And there's nothing wrong with being an employee. The world needs employees. There's nothing wrong with it in any way, shape, or form. But the thing that is holding most people back who want to even go that route is simply fear and lack of encouragement. Because for years and years, society tells us go to college, get a degree, you have a job waiting for you, and that's no longer true. But it also negatively affected the trades industries, which I'm passionate about. I know you are as well, being in the trades industry, blue collar world. There's a ton of opportunity out there for individuals who want to bet on themselves, either as an individual person or betting on themselves with specific skill sets that are needed in businesses like SWF.
Yeah.
There's a ton of opportunity, but you have to be willing to break the mold, so to speak. And I think that in the last 5-6 years, I think that's happening a lot of it. Where I'm curious to hear your thoughts from somebody in the industry at such a high level who's been in it, longer than I have, and is more directly associated with it. But I think that pendulum is coming back from the extreme of college is the only way to go, when in reality there's a ton of opportunity in multiple ways.
Yeah. I think it's education. I think it's minimalist. I think there's a devotion to not going into debt from the kids coming out of high school. And I also think they know that I won't be sitting on a bench waiting for a job. I will literally have a job before I hit the parking lot, and then multiple offers. Right? And they'll also pay for my school. So like, it's the best of like all the worlds, and there's so much work and so little people that overtime's not an issue. And so, yeah, I'm with you.
My son's 11 and he wants to start working. I'm like, dude, nobody's going to hire you right now, buddy. I'll do my best to teach you what little skills I have, but I'll certainly encourage you in this world and make some introductions, but nobody's hiring you quite yet, little man.
No, we can't do that yet, but at least he's got the drive. No, I would say probably when I started, I'll be there 7 years in July. And the first 2, we'd hire 10 kids out of school. We'd probably keep 2. We're hiring 10 now. We're keeping 9 or 10 because they're coming in wanting to do this for their career, not as a last option. That's the different mindset.
It's a huge different mindset. And that's an important mindset because, the trades built our country. And there's such an important aspect. I'm sorry?
Still do.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's such an important aspect that, again, it goes back to opportunity and that mindset. But I love how you mentioned there's that shift. It's not an afterthought for them anymore.
Nope.
It's what they want to do. And that's such a huge importance for any type of job, whatever it is. When you're doing something you want to be doing, just by nature, you're going to be better at it.
Yeah, I totally agree. The real people problem. You say you work hard to get organizations to admit they have people problems. What are some of the biggest blind spot leaders have when it comes to their people, and why are they so reluctant to face them?
What are some of the biggest blind spots? Well, leaders, thinking they're good leaders. the person most difficult to lead is the one you look in the mirror every day.
Sure.
And that goes for me as well. There's things I could definitely improve on. I'm working to improve on. But the reality is, people think they're better leaders than they actually are, and that's a big hit to the ego, right?
Hmm.
So admitting that you don't know everything as a leader, or you don't have the best information, or you try to micromanage people to do things the exact same way you would as a leader, is holding you back as an organization, not only with recruitment, retention, but essentially with growth and the bottom line.
Mm.
You have to be willing to let go and do some things that only you can do as a leader, and then delegate the rest. But getting leaders to buy into the understanding and recognize that they're often the bottleneck in their own organizations, is very humbling and very sobering, and for a lot of leaders. And I get it. I think I'm
Mm.
great at what I do. There's people out there that would wholly disagree with that statement, and there's some out there that say, yes, you are great at what you do, and they're not blowing smoke just to kiss my butt.
Right.
So because then I'm not a great leader for everybody. I have a style that isn't good for this or isn't good for that, and I get it. But that's okay. Being self-employed, I don't have to work with them then, and I get to find who I want to work with. That same drive, same ambition, same mindset of the importance of culture.
Mm.
There's you mentioned earlier, there's leaders out there that just don't get the importance of culture still in the year 2025, and they'll be left behind.
So it's an interesting concept because you mentioned as self-employed, you get to pick who, like you're not targeting everyone, right? You're
Correct.
targeting a group that, just like when you're doing like personal branding online, I'm not putting stuff online to capture everyone in the net. You're just trying to throw it to the people who, are on the same wavelength or vibe as you are. Now, what's interesting is when you're talking about leaders who run companies, I don't think you can go about it with the same thought process, because you do have to get the majority. And so let me ask you this question, because I struggle with this one and on a lot of accounts of, I see it a lot in myself and with other people.
Mhm.
Is ignorance or insecurity a bigger problem for leaders?
Ooh, I would have to go with insecurity.
Okay.
Um, I think, I grew up in the 80s watching G.I. Joe Saturday morning cartoons, right?
Woo!
The PSAs after G.I. Joe on Saturday morning, knowing is half the battle, right?
Ooh, yeah.
Just knowing what to do isn't enough. We have to take that action.
Mm.
But I think that's where the insecurity comes in, is the fear around being insecure and not willing to make mistakes, being afraid of that failure, and look back to the education system. What is the worst grade you could get in school?
F.
It was an F. And what did F represent?
Fail.
Fail. Yet in reality, most of our success, and a way a lot of us learn the best, is through our failures
Sure.
and overcoming those failures. So I think that insecurity, I mean, there's certain people that are ignorant out there. There's no doubt about it. But I really think it's an insecurity that comes with the mindset that they can do it themselves, or they can do it all. And they're afraid to delegate. They're afraid to try new things. They're afraid to look foolish. Now, obviously, in some careers and some worlds, failure means certain things like death or severe
Yes.
injuries.
Yes.
You know,
Surgeons, you name it. Right.
yeah, those obviously nobody wants them to fail.
Right.
But the reality is, medical deaths are probably the number 2 or 3 cause of death in our country, and
Mm.
not by design, obviously, but
Right.
just because nobody's perfect.
Mm.
But that we got to get out of the education system that failure is bad. It's a learning experience. Don't try to fail, but you're never going to get it right all the time, and we have to be okay with that as professionals, but also get that okay with the education system.
But you also have to be, I think that leans into the second phase of that in leadership would be like really the strengths and weaknesses, right? And really don't just talk about what somebody can't do, try to find them a seat of where it fits what they're really good at, right? Because they're going to continue to fail if you just leave them in that same seat. It's not a good
Oh
fit
yeah.
for them. And then then they're gone, right? That's a big push for us in management at SWF is like, okay, this isn't working. but what is this person really good at? And do we have that inside the company to help facilitate them as a human being?
Well, think about what you mean. Think about what you're good at, your strengths. You have more fun doing those because they're
Correct.
your strengths versus your weaknesses.
Yep.
And when I talk about this concept with some training I do with new young people, I talk about cutting the grass. I have not cut the grass in like 10 years, 11 years.
How
And
dare you?
I know.
I love
You know,
mowing.
I hate mowing. I hate it
love
with
it.
a passion. But see, that's how we're different. That's okay, right? When I first launched my business, it took me 3 years to convince my wife that I did not need to be the one cutting the grass because it didn't make sense.
She sounds like a smart woman.
Well, no, I wanted a good-looking yard. I
get
wanted it to look nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so we had the same goal at the end. Just the path to get there were different.
Yeah.
She's from Lancaster County. I'm not. She grew up with her dad doing a 6 a.m. to like 3 p.m. shift Monday through
Yep.
Friday every day. Again, nothing wrong with that, but this is not the world I come from.
Sure.
And so just differences like that. Okay, we wanted the same goal. How do we get there? What works for us? So the first 3 years, I'd begrudgingly, spend 90 minutes a week, 90 minutes every other week cutting the grass.
In heaven, Steve.
Well, we didn't. It wasn't even have a big place. It's just that 20 minutes to get on my grass clothes or dirty clothes, get the mower ready. 45, 50 minutes to actually cut the grass, and then 10 minutes to clean up, whatever, right?
Yeah.
But it just killed my mindset.
Yeah.
And I was frustrated. Like, I don't want to be doing this. I don't want to be doing this. But the first 3 years of building my business didn't have the funds really. I could justify it because I understood the trade-off,
Sure.
but couldn't convince my wife for like 3 years. And then I haven't done it for 10 plus years. And now, thankfully, my kids last summer were old enough to start doing it. So that budget, is back in my pocket a lot more than it was before, which is nice.
11-year-old's job.
So, well, yeah, it's fun to be able to, let them do it now and pay them versus paying, another company to do it.
Sure.
And will they do it the exact same way I would? Probably not, but it works for me.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be perfect to they got the job done. It looks good. Okay, let's move on.
That's brilliant. Building the Goble group. So your work focuses on leadership development and team building. What's the single biggest leadership mistake you see businesses making today, and how do you help them fix it?
The single biggest mistake I see them making today, thinking one size fits all approach.
Ooh.
One size does not fit all. And we have to be willing to recognize that with the somewhat individualized approach, we have to be willing to spend the time and dollars investment to make it work for our team. The old way of putting everybody in a training room for 2 or 3 hours at a time,
Hate it.
sitting in front of computers, hearing somebody read a PowerPoint, it never really worked completely.
That's all
Ever?
we had.
But right, exactly. You did what you had.
Yeah.
Well, now and I still do. I don't read off the PowerPoint, but I still get people in a room sometimes together.
Yeah, sure.
But it's not a one size fits all approach. You have to be willing to look at people individually. Going back to what we were talking about a minute ago, strengths and weaknesses, right? Some people don't learn that way the best, where others do. Some people want to learn on the job, making mistakes, do this, and seeing by example. Well, that learning curve might be a little bit longer for some person, or it might be that much quicker for some person as well. So getting away from the one size fits all approach, I think, is of the utmost importance.
Do you think it's not used that often because it's the more difficult path? That takes a lot of work.
It does take a lot of work, and it's an increase of dollars as well as time, and time is money in business. I know this,
Right.
you know this. But the reality is, as a company, as an organization, you have to decide if you want to play the short game or the long game. And so many companies are focused on the short game now, because that's what we see, in the stock market, right? Everything quarterly reports this, quarterly report that, becoming numbers on a spreadsheet, and numbers matter. I'm a capitalist. I like business. I like making money. Numbers matter. But sometimes if you sacrifice short term because you're playing the long game, those long game numbers can be far more impactful than if you just focus on the short term. Is one thing. The other thing is I think they don't do it a lot because they never saw it. They're reverting back to what they experienced,
Sure.
and it worked for them, or they think it works for them, so that's why they're doing it that way, and it just doesn't. So those two combination things, I believe, have a huge impact.
Yeah, and that's got to be tough selling something for leaders who maybe don't live in that mindset of super long, right? Because not everybody visualizes their plans for 5, 10, 15 years out, right? Some people live in
Right.
months or single years or maybe 2 to 3. So you're trying to sell something that is going to benefit them 5 years down the road. That's got to be a hard sell.
It is. It is. But some of those clients have been with me for a few years, and some of my
And they
body
get
shop
it.
guys, they were with me for a few years, and then sold. Kind of at the peak when the VC money was coming into the body shop world. They sold at the top.
Yeah.
So good for them, right? Because they saw the long game. They played the long game, and now, a couple of them, went into other businesses. A couple of them retired and enjoying that life. But yeah, the long game more often than not beats the short game.
I agree.
I don't want to say always because there's some home run hitters that get lucky once or twice, but the reality is the long game beats the short game.
Yeah, when I think about culture, I break it down pretty simply. At least in my head, this is the way it works. Like I think one, there's obviously the efficiency gain that you get from it. I do equate a lot of we don't waste a lot of money on attrition because when we get people, we like to keep them as happy. And my equation is happy people or efficient people. Like it is that simple for me. Like if they are super happy, I know when I have baggage either at home or at work, and I go into work, I am not as good of an employee as I could be. Because
Absolutely.
I'm pissed about something. It's
Yeah.
really simple. So if your employees are coming in or yourself is coming in and you're annoyed about something and that annoyance never goes away, it's just going to slow you down every day.
Yeah, it just becomes, that mindset and our emotions. And back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, you'd go to work 9 to 5, work was at work, home is at home. But technology has brought everything together. Not only the realities, my phone's next to me. I'm on my computer at home. You're in your home studio. Your phone's next to you, probably. You're close by. If a work emergency happens, you're getting a phone call.
Correct.
So the reality is, a lot of maybe the members of your team are getting a phone call as well at 7:30 at night, and depending on what's going on in their life, it's a disruption.
Yep.
So we're all human. And we're bringing those back and forth to work, which we can't ignore them like they could in the past, or they can't pretend to ignore them, like they could in the past, because we don't leave ourselves fully at work. We don't leave ourselves fully at home, nor should we. I don't think.
Agreed.
And I think that's a big differentiator with the generations in organizations. Some of the old school guys like work, home, and keep it separate, whereas the generation behind us, they're like, I'm not doing that. I'm not, jumping in and out of a clown suit between roles. I am who I am, take it or leave it, for better or for worse.
Right.
Now, there's some extremes that people go through, and, every organization needs to address those as fit. But, you've heard this probably, happy house, happy spouse.
Yep.
Well, I love your equation. Happy employees are efficient employees, and it makes things go. It's very simple. I like that. And it's incredibly true.
Yeah, I think and the second part of that is what I'm really trying to push for this year, which the big change is like trying to fix the entire ecosystem, right? Like you said, like there are very few people I think that work at SWF that can actually turn off the home life when you walk through the door. We have some of them, and I do believe they can do it. I don't know how they do it, but I don't think that's actually reasonable to expect for people. So like, that's why when we put into place our free mental health for all of our employees, it includes 7 family members for every employee, because if I'm good, but I have a child that's not good, I'm bringing that in. I'm thinking about that all day, right? Or maybe I need couples counseling, whatever that looks like. You gotta extend, I think, the engagement beyond just the employee and the life that's happening inside the walls.
Yeah, and that's where your competitive advantage comes in. Because even if they never utilize that service or don't think they need that service, teammates value that for their other teammates who might need it.
Correct.
Or they say, you know what, if I ever need that, I'm not getting that anywhere else.
Agreed.
And it shows you actually care about them versus just the dollars and cents of it.
Hmm.
And that's a huge competitive advantage because of the foresight of being able to offer that. That's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. Now the big thing is, it's construction. So the next part of that is selling it, right? Selling, because there's a stigma that comes with all of this, which is why, just getting through that, getting people to understand what it's there for, and all that kind of stuff. But that's the next.
That stigma is going away with the generations behind us.
Totally agree.
And so I think it's, and I also think even, I'm a Gen Xer. Based off, what I know about you, you're,
Millennial.
Gen X or millennial. Yeah.
Yep.
So, the generations that are ahead of us, the boomers that are still in business, even a lot of them are coming around to, forgive the generalization,
Yes.
but a lot of them are coming around to the idea and the realization that, hey, this isn't a fad that's going away. This isn't something that we can ignore. This isn't something that we can just, shove under the rug and pretend it doesn't exist. It's a reality. And the boomers who are leading companies that recognize this, again, if they take action on it, again, knowing something and doing something about it are two different things.
Yeah, good point.
They have to be taking action on it to give them that true competitive advantage. And in the construction world, it doesn't, as an outside observer,
yep.
I'm not seeing it happen, 3, 4, 5 years ago. One thing I have noticed a lot in the last 6 months is construction companies hiring or looking for people with the titles of director of culture or director of people enablement or director of people in some capacity, which I think is phenomenal. There's a lot of companies out there, even beyond the construction world, that are doing that now, which I think is great.
You know why?
Because I recognize that people are important beyond just the numbers.
And the demand, right?
Yes.
The demand's so high for one, finding them, getting them to come to your company, and then keeping them, right?
Yeah, because ultimately, employee retention is huge because you spend a ton of money recruiting people. But if they leave in 6 months, a year, or even 2 or 3 years,
Waste.
The longer they're there, the more they're going to cost to replace anyway, right?
Correct.
So that becomes a huge bottom line issue where you have to focus on the people you have because it's always going to be more cost effective, more efficient, and more valuable for organizations to retain the people they have versus finding new ones.
Yeah, I never understood the comment of I just can't find good people while they're just letting good people go out the door.
Because they're not willing to look in the mirror at themselves as their leadership style.
I know. That's all. Oh my god, that's a whole nother. We could do a whole separate podcast just on that one sentence.
We can schedule something for the future again. I'm good with that.
The high touch approach. Your philosophy is that more high tech we become, the more high touch we need to be. Can you break that down? How do businesses strike that balance between technology and human connection?
It's easier. It's much easier with smaller businesses where I've focused on the last 13, 14 years because again, smaller people, it's much easier just by numbers, right? From a volume standpoint. So the smaller businesses is where they're able to do things, buy lunch for the entire team, once a week, once a month. They're engaged with professional development for the entire team, not just the top third or top half of the organization. Big companies is something I'm still learning about just because I'm starting to shift into bigger companies.
Sure.
But the ones that I've started working with, it starts at the team level. The team leader has to be bought into it, just as in the smaller businesses, the owner or the CEO has to be bought into it. And the larger company, the team leader or the team manager, the quote unquote middle manager people, right? Where they're stuck between a rock and a hard place, depending on how their CEO is.
Yep.
They have to be bought into it, even more so than the CEO does, because Gallup does a ton of research out there, and research shows that your direct supervisor has the greatest impact on your success or failure at any organization. So who's your direct supervisor, and what is your relationship like with them? Well, if that's good, then it gives an opportunity for that middle manager. What is his or her relationship with the person above them?
Yep.
Because, like you see, just like leaving stuff at home versus at work. Well, if your middle manager has a great team below them, but they have a crappy relationship with their boss, well, what's going to happen there? That middle manager will eventually leave, which creates a bigger gap.
Yep.
So within small businesses, again, it's that continuity, that consistency of getting together. With bigger companies, I'm finding it's that middle manager position that needs to be, spread upward and or spread downward. And the higher up you go, the more involved the leadership needs to be with authorizing it, providing resources, providing time, and buying into it. But even without that, as a middle manager, you can lead your team and lead your team well. And it might lead to opportunities maybe somewhere else where you feel appreciated. But that is what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's almost the ideology being scalable, I think, is a huge problem for people as organizations get larger. Like, like you're not going to be able to go around and pat everybody on the shoulder and say, how are you doing? How are the kids? And remember all that, right? Because as that grows, how do you make everybody feel connected with not having to do individual touch points? Because there's going to be a come a point in time if you get large enough, it's not possible anymore. And I think people struggle with scalability and connection.
I want to challenge you on that a little bit if I can.
Okay.
There's a story out of Home Depot years ago. The CEO of Home Depot every Sunday wrote 100 thank you notes, 100 plus thank you notes to individual members. He had his team collect stories of significance that happened during that week or happened the previous, some milestone or something. So every Sunday he would write down, and write individual thank you notes to these team members, whether they were your middle managers, whether they were VPs, whether they were executives, whether they were your brand new store front clerks, right?
Yep.
And now Home Depot is on a whole different scale than where where SVW is at, or excuse me, SWF is at, and where I'm at.
Yep.
But it comes down to the intention and the discipline. Is it hard? 100%. I'm self-employed. I don't have any team with me, and I struggle to commit the time to doing, thank you notes like I should. That's an area where I frequently look at myself. I need to write more thank you notes, personalized versus emails. I send a lot of emails saying thank you and appreciate my people that I work with on that way. But that personal handwritten note, that's an area I could use improvement on from a discipline standpoint. It's incredibly hard and challenging, but if you commit to it time-wise and have people helping you along the way. Okay,
I don't think thank you notes are scalable. Like I hear what you're saying.
Yeah,
I hear that it's completely possible. Yeah, I mean, obviously something's working for them, but I think there's other ways to go about. Like from what I've heard, the stories of the CEO of Chick-fil-A, like goes around and talks and does like a 15-minute interview with every employee for Chick-fil-A, so like if this person has the time to do that, right? Like anything's possible if that story's true or whatever he or she does. So yeah, I'm with you. I'm not a big thank you note, but like I don't understand the fascination with handwritten thank you notes. I do not understand it. Like you never have to anyone take the time to ever have to do that for me. Just like email's good, text is even better. So like don't even waste your time. But yeah, I don't know. I'm with you. Obviously, they're doing a lot right. I think that's the hardest part, is to have a human connection at a large scale within an organization. I think that just keeps getting harder and harder.
Yeah, but break it down to teams, right? Teams of 10. Where is your lowest? Within SWF, where is your lowest manager level? That manager should be able to do it however it suits his or her team, right?
Correct.
And he or she has to figure out what works for each individual member of her team. That's where it has to start. Because if it doesn't start there, no matter what you do, it's not going to be as effective.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's in any organization. I'm not, that's in any organization. The closer to the front lines, the closer to the engagement, that's where that relationship has to exist the strongest.
Yeah, I think like our 32-person book club, like when we meet twice a week, through Teams, like that is a real connection point for us all, because I'm in it, Brian, our CEO, is in it, like, and we go in conversation, and we have 6 people that talk weekly. Like, it's a real point for everyone to, one, be connected with management, because there are a lot of managers in there, there's a lot of frontline supervisors, there's a lot of employees, and we all get to kind of have our piece as we work through the book. So I think things like that could be scalable to as many people as possible. I could have a book club like Oprah with 1 million people, and I just keep working down through 1 million people list for them to talk about a chapter, right? And you just move on. And like, obviously, you're a reader. I'm looking all over behind you. But
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you what book are you guys doing now? Because I saw that somewhere. Now that you mentioned, I remember I saw that somewhere in a LinkedIn post from a few months ago. Whatever.
Yeah. So
what book are you guys doing now?
We are finishing. We actually have one more chapter, one more reading for Friday, which is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Oh, Stephen Covey. Okay.
Yes. So that, and then we're moving on to Atomic Habits at the end of March. So I'm giving them
James
about
Clear.
3
Okay.
weeks. Yep, 3 weeks off, and then we're starting it up again. But I mean, I've been screaming about book clubs and how it's the cheapest, best leadership, self-help, and team collaboration thing I think I've ever done in my entire life for $330.
Yeah, it's an investment long term. It's playing the long game. It's
100%.
Yeah, which is phenomenal. I do love to read. I'm actually.
Those of you not watching, there's about 1,000 books behind him.
Well, that's one of my. That's one of the ways I can spend less money on, because I'll buy 2 or 3 books at a time. I'll read one, but then I'll buy 2 or 3 more, or 4 more, 5 more, and only read 1 or 2. I'm like, my Amazon wish list that I've saved for later. I kid you not, is 476 deep.
Wow.
Now I haven't culled that list in a while. It's probably been a good year since I culled that list. So if a book's been on there for more than a year and a half, I got to go through and get it off. So I'll still knock that down to probably 250-ish. But I do love to read. But you said it's a great way just to connect and relate and get people to build relationships.
I'm 100% bought into reading, and I wasn't just a year ago. But I know that if I'm going to continually get better, I have to do it, because there's and this is a type of reading for me. Like, this is one of the reasons I do the podcast, is because it's a free book for me once a week.
Yeah.
Because I get to talk to really smart people for an hour, and guess what? I usually get.
Wait, how am I on here then? How did I get on here, Dad? What's up with that?
It was a free sign-up, Steve. That's brilliant. Right, what do I got next? What's been the hardest leadership lesson you have learned in your own career, and how has it shaped the way you coach others?
The hardest leadership lesson I have learned. Sometimes you need to forgive yourself.
Ooh.
I don't want to say I'm a perfectionist, because I'm not a perfectionist by any stretch of the means, I don't think, but I have high standards for myself. I beat myself up more than I maybe should. And in some areas, I don't beat myself up enough. So that understanding of trying to recognize myself where I'm getting into my own head, and then figuring out how to get out of my own head. One of my early mentors, as part of Maxwell Leadership, who's unfortunately since passed, taught me that, we all have that little voice in our head, right? He called it an inner critic. We all have that inner critic in our head. And whatever that inner critic says to us is a reflection of how we behave on that daily basis during this meeting, this relationship. And he taught me we have to be an inner critic assassin. And we have to do it on a daily basis, sometimes multiple times a day. So being able to become my own inner critic assassin consistently it was a huge revelation years ago. And it's something I still work on now. Again, because that voice, for me anyway, has not gone away. Sometimes it's been amplified, especially after I make mistakes or disrupt a relationship in a negative way, and I beat myself up too much. So that's for me, getting out of my own way, getting out of my own head, becoming consistent, being an inner critic assassin has been very helpful in a lot of ways, and then sharing that with others.
Yeah,
because I believe that most individuals who are have a growth mindset, very forward focused, the standard they hold themselves to is higher than any standard anybody else can, and we're more inclined to beat ourselves up more than we should sometimes. So getting over that and getting away from that has been very beneficial.
Yeah, that's why I love peer groups, because when I get in that,
Hmm.
when I get racked in that, I just go to that group and let it vomit, and then they're just like, "What are you? What?" Like, because it's just perspective, right? You just need
Right.
perspective in that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very good.
Absolutely. And you're not the first person to make that mistake. You won't be
Sure.
the last. And hopefully you're not making that mistake again. Although I'm guilty of making the same mistake several times here now, and
Yeah,
it's
same.
part of the learning process.
Yeah, that's good. You organized two big professional development events, the Kingdom Focus Summit and
Hmm.
Live to Lead. What have been the most powerful takeaways from these events, and how do you measure their impact?
The most powerful takeaways, I think, has been the community connections.
Mm.
Um, my Live to Lead. This is the 12th year that I'll be hosting Live to Lead here in Central Pennsylvania. Friday, October 3rd at
Hey,
Shady Maple. Shameless plug.
hey.
Um, and that is an event that I host through Maxwell Leadership.
Okay.
So they pick the speakers. It's all simulcast videos. I have very, very limited say. I recommend some speakers, but I don't know if they use my recommendations or not. But the Kingdom Focus Summit is a faith-based event that I host in April. It's coming up in April 24th this year.
Nice.
And I started that. This is the 6th year that I started that based off my success at Live to Lead. But the speakers are live in person,
Nice.
and there's no audio recording of it. There's no video recording of it. You're in the room or you miss it. And I did that intentionally, simply because again, it goes back to technology, what we started with, right? The technology is awesome. It's amazing. But being in the room with speakers and being in the room with live people and interacting with them and learning together and laughing together is a valuable resource of just connection.
Mm.
Um, so that's, I mean, those that community aspect, that connection, because fortunately I have a lot of great sponsors, other small businesses who come alongside to help bring both of these events to life. Because without those I am not independently wealthy. We talked earlier about competitive advantage, having a boatload of money. It's not a competitive advantage I have,
Yeah, understood.
but I got a lot of great partners in both of these, ventures to bring these high quality speakers in for Kingdom Focus Summit, or to make the investment with Maxwell Leadership to get that license. So that community aspect is huge, because as a small business, I can't do it alone. And no small business can do it alone. You just mentioned peer groups, the importance of them. Wholeheartedly agree. There's a ton of value in peer groups, um, and or just tight relationships, to have those honest conversations
Yeah.
about everything. I love, again, the title of this podcast right now is just some BS. We're just some guys right now just BSing a little bit.
Yeah.
We've actually never met in person,
No, we
so
have
I mean,
not.
and this is actually the first time we've really ever talked. I think we've
Yes.
interacted a little bit, via email or social media,
Yeah.
whatever. But we're just, stuff like this is awesome and valuable, but also to be able to go deeper with individuals who we trust,
Mm.
and recognize the importance of, hey, I can be vulnerable with them, and they're gonna, they might say something harsh, but not in a negative way, just a
Right.
positive challenge way. They have my best interest in mind, just like I have their best interest in mind. But we need to be able to hear that, and these
Yeah.
events kind of bring that community together to start those relationships sometimes, or expand those relationships.
Yeah, I think executives, it's so key, because
Hmm.
I feel like the higher you get up that ladder, the less circles you can actually talk about stuff, right? Because you can't always let some of those worries out and some of those things amongst your management team, because it's just not the place for it. And it's
Yeah.
kind of unfair to unload that kind of stuff on them, I feel. So you need these other avenues to, just like I said, vomit your fears, vomit things holding you back, talk about whatever, and then that constructive feedback to say, like, you're okay, yes, you should be scared, or no, or let's group together and help you get through this, that kind of thing.
Yeah, because we don't go through life alone, and we shouldn't be going through life alone.
Yeah.
And I certainly don't have all the answers. I do executive coaching with small business owners, and I provide that service. I used to have the peer groups with the body shop world. I don't have any peer groups currently, just because there's a ton of them out there,
Yeah.
which isn't a bad thing. It's just something I've decided not to pursue, as host and as facilitator.
Yeah.
But having that access, somebody within the world of business who you trust and who doesn't report to you directly. I think that you said that's a huge advantageous aspect. So if you're listening, to this podcast, you're not part of a peer group.
Mhm.
Reach out to Brandon. He knows a bunch of people who can hook you up with peer groups.
Thank
As
you.
do I. I mean, I know people as well,
Yeah.
both faith-based and non-faith-based. So if you're a person of faith, reach out to me. If you're not a person of faith, or maybe if you're Brandon, I don't know if you are or not, it doesn't matter, but reach out to Brandon because he knows some people in that world as well.
Yeah, it's just I think it's the main thing that I would say has completely changed the trajectory of my career just based on in my own head, right?
Yeah,
Maybe not actual execution in my life, but like less stress
right.
because of that group, right?
We all need somebody to listen to us,
Yeah,
you know,
no doubt.
and that plays a role in how we perform as leaders
Yes.
back at our organizations, right?
100%.
If we're less stressed because we met with this peer group or because we met with this coach, okay, we take that energy and pour it back into our teams that much easier.
Yeah, that's beautiful. As a founding partner of the Maxwell Leadership Certified Team, what's one leadership principle from John Maxwell that more people need to hear and actually apply?
Everyone deserves to be led well. That is something that was
That's a
shared
lot
with
of
us.
responsibility.
It is a lot of responsibility. That's why we struggle with leaders. There's a leadership deficit in our country, right? Because with leadership comes additional responsibilities that a lot of people don't really want.
Correct.
And it's in some ways I can't blame them because of the stuff we go through sometimes. But I'm not built that way. I want them. But I want those. But everyone deserves to be led well. So where does leadership start? First, leadership starts with you, the person you look at in the mirror every day. And you have to lead yourself well in order to lead others well. And so when I think with, we've talked about, the different generations, the generations coming behind us, millennials and Z and Alpha, they understand, they see bad leadership across the spectrum and they're not putting up with it, which I think is phenomenal. And I think that's why you're seeing a shift, that pendulum's coming back and, they're demanding good leadership. And leadership to this generation is coming behind us is different from a definition standpoint than leadership to generation ahead of us.
Yep.
So, everyone deserves to be led well at school, at home, in the workplace, in professional settings. So I think that has been one of the most impactful statements, from John and the team with Maxwell Leadership, because that's reality. Because we're dealing with that humanity of people that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it's amazing. When I think about that sentence, I think about the people that I've run across that you may hire that come in with a lot of baggage from previous employers, right? And like you have to be conscious of that, and you got to give them the space to walk through that and learn that this is better. It's the better situation you're in, right? But it comes with mistakes and time and insecurities and all this shit, and it just can't be a judgment right off that.
Yeah, and you need that time to adjust.
Yeah.
You've probably heard the saying, grass isn't greener on the other side. Grass is greener where you water it. Maybe when they're coming to your organization, it's the first time they're involved where it's intentionally being watered with good leadership, with good people relationships, and it's new to them.
Yeah.
And the mindset is, oh, is this fake? Is this real? Am I going to lose this? What's going on? But in true organizations that are doing this positively and effectively, they'll never want to leave. And again, it goes back to that competitive advantage. It doesn't mean things are perfect.
Nope.
And
never will be.
They won't. And they have to recognize that, and you have to recognize that as the leader. But when you get on the same page and like, hey, you know what? I recognize it's not perfect, but I'm going to keep watering the grass where I'm at.
Yeah.
It might get a brown spot over here, a brown spot over there, but ultimately there's a lot more green where I'm at because I'm watering it versus over there.
Yeah, one of my favorite gauges for how well we're doing in culture, because I think it's hard unless you take an assessment or 360 or whatever. Like, I love to listen to how mature or not mature our arguments are, right? So how do we walk through conflict as a company, and how mature are those conversations? It's a pretty easy tell on how well you're doing.
I like that. I got to think more about that. I like that a lot.
Yeah,
I do like that a lot.
I've seen in my past like a maturity model for a company, right? And it's like, I guess 4 stages, the person who taught me. And it's like those first one is like really those conflicts are just aggressive, they're gross, they're all the things you don't want to do. And as you move from 1 to 2, that's just that level goes up and it's more you're always going to have arguments and people not seeing things eye to eye. That is just human beings in general. But how you manage those conversations is a completely different level when you're really pushing that.
Yeah. Well, talk about conflict, right? At Live to Lead, 2024, Michael Jr., comedian, talked about how conflict is actually a good thing when handled the right way.
Agreed.
And I love, thinking about it now, how you said maturity, when we handle conflict in a mature way and are curious about why we feel conflicted.
Yes.
And that curiosity comes from Michael Jr. How do we amplify that? Because it's not, that's how we get to results. We can't just, act immature and blame other people around it.
Correct.
We have to be able to work through it because conflict's not going away. But how do we get curious about it? I got more thinking to do on that whole maturity aspect as it relates to conflict and curiosity. But I like that. I got to think about that more. I agree with it. I just got to,
no,
dig
you're
into
good.
it deeper.
I love that you say curious because, in that conflict, you have to also think, how much can I learn from this person that I don't agree with?
Yeah.
Right. Because that's your biggest avenue to learn new things, is when you're like, you're over here, I'm over here. I better start thinking about some of that, because like there may be something you can't just assume you're right. Right.
Yeah. And because, we're all different people, not good or bad, right or wrong, not better or worse. We're just different. Well, how do we put aside our differences or get closer for the common good of the organization we're in right now?
Correct.
To advance what we need for SWF, to advance what we need for the Goble Group. Okay, how do we do this and learn from each other?
Could you give me one of the most transformational leadership breakthroughs? You don't have to name any names that you've witnessed where someone got it and then changed everything.
Where somebody got it and it changes everything.
Where you've seen like them, where you've been working with them, and it's like finally that aha moment hits, and you're like, and then you can just watch the ball start rolling.
My very first client, who is still a client today, not in the same capacity, but individuals who become a great friend as well. He was one of the first guys back in the day. I was coaching him, went to do the job, got fired, went back to him and said, "Hey, did you miss me?" He was one of the first guys that said, "Yes, I missed you." So I continued doing executive coaching with him. At the time, he was running the company that, bears the family name, but his dad was still in charge. Okay. His dad told him, "You go run it and do things," but his dad still held the purse strings, which means dad was in charge.
Yep.
So we were doing executive coaching for 4 years, and, slow, small, incremental changes. And then, 4 years, we put a pause on the coaching because some other things that, required a priority. And here we are now, 13 years later. He is now running the family business, like as the owner.
Yep.
And that includes not only the business, but also the land, which is huge. He has stakes in 3 other businesses as well.
Brilliant.
And, about a year and a half ago, we were having, lunch or discussion about something else, because we still work together on some things. And, he sat down and said, "Hey, stuff we worked on 10 years ago, I'm finally able to implement now."
Wow.
Because I let those ideas sit in my head, but also now because I'm in a position to be able to do it. But he also reflected on his own personal mental growth.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't in a position, because, as the second generation bearing the family name, where he had the title and the expectations, there was still that hidden aspect of trying to please dad, but also dad having the purse strings. That is kind of a conflict sometimes.
Sure.
When you want to be able to do things, but, the generation ahead of you or the boss, you're not going in the same direction overall.
Yep.
So that's been, the fact that he trusted in me enough years later to say, "Hey, that had a huge impact on me, and this is where I'm at now." So something he's a very dear friend, running some great businesses here in Central PA, and just it's one of those silent validations, so to speak, that don't get to talk about that much.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. That'd be an amazing story. And especially for that longevity, seeing that manifest into it. Because, as consultants, you don't always get that privilege.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, there's other stories out there that you know, it's hard to toot your own horn. If I tell you I do I'm awesome, it's bragging. If somebody else tells you I'm awesome, it's a recommendation.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, you mentioned a little bit earlier, shameless plug, Steve. Where can people find you? What do you do? What do you love to help with? So that people, if they love this conversation, how can they get a hold of you?
Find me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
If you're not on LinkedIn, you should be on LinkedIn.
Ooh.
The LinkedIn of 5 years ago doesn't exist. It's become a little bit too much like Facebook in some ways lately.
Yeah. Slow
Which
down,
is,
people.
yeah. Step back, keep it professional, and keep the politics off LinkedIn as much as possible.
Thank you.
I mean, politics affects us in business world. I get it, but be intelligent with your conversations in politics,
there you go.
not just slinging mud. Enough rant there. But find me on LinkedIn. Look up the Goble Group. If you're in Central Pennsylvania, again, I host 2 big events every year: the Kingdom Focus Summit and Live to Lead. If you Google either of those, odds are high you'll find me that way. But come out, and I enjoy doing. If I enjoy doing conversations like this via podcast over a good beverage afternoon. Whatever. Let's get together and chat. I'm always up for learning and conversations.
Awesome. And that's Goble group, correct?
Yes, thegoblegroup.com is my email. And it's only 1 B. It's not Gobble. I get Gobble quite a bit, especially around Thanksgiving, right? Now, I see you're laughing, Brandon, but that's one of those, unique names that, hey, it's
Love
only
it.
1 B, and we all know how to spell Gobble because of Thanksgiving. So come on, people, get it right. Let's go.
Just drop a B and you're there.
Exactly.
Well, Steve, this was amazing. Thank you so much for putting your name in. So not everybody does that as well. I say this quite a bit. I asked quite a few people, and I have my form out there because I love when people just go and put it in and want to go for a ride and have a conversation. So I appreciate you doing that. And this was really great and amazing to finally meet you officially.
Yeah, likewise. I appreciate the opportunity, and being a solopreneur. If you're not out promoting yourself, nobody's gonna do it for you. So and that's true for everybody. You gotta you got to promote yourself as much as possible. I'm my own biggest cheerleader. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad.
Yeah,
but this time it was great. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation here on the Just Some BS podcast, and that's really what it was, Just Some BS today, and I love it.
I love the plugs that I forget to do myself. So thank you so much for that, Steve. And we will.
I've been a guest on a number of podcasts. It's part of the responsibility I have as a guest. I feel is to promote that podcast.
That was amazing. We'll catch everybody on the next one.
Have a good one, man.